The following are essential terms in order to understand Paul and his project. Without understanding these concepts properly, Paul is simply inaccessible to you. You won't understand him. You won't get his letters. Misunderstanding and distortion inescapably results. So, in order to read Paul respectfully, let's go over these terms. Jesus movement. Jesus and the group or political faction composed of his immediate circle of Galilean peasant followers, their families and friends, sometime around 29 Common Era. Its innovation or gospel was the proclamation that the God of Israel would soon establish Israelite theocracy. Holy man folk healer Jesus healed with his followers, fellow Israelites, in order to prepare them for imminent theocracy. Jesus group. Those who followed after Jesus' death and resurrection in small groups throughout the Mediterranean world. They called themselves followers of the way. They did not call themselves Christians. The term we translate as Christian occurs only 3 times in the New Testament, but it is used exclusively by outsiders with negative connotation. This word was a derogatory slur, comparable to the N-word as used today by hateful people who are outsiders to the United States black experience. This Greek insult, as seen in the New Testament, has nothing to do with what we mean by Christian, designating persons marked more by doctrines and events of the 4th and later centuries, such as the Trinity of the Godhead, double natures of Christ, and consolidating a hierarchically structured universal church. Consequently, it is simply anachronistic and thus inaccurate, not to mention extremely disrespectful, to refer to Paul or any other New Testament follower of Jesus as Christian, in much the same way as it would be to label any owned person of the 19th century Americas by the hateful N-word. So, what should we call New Testament followers of Jesus like Paul? A better term would be messianist. Generations or waves. Please look carefully at the graphic. Each of these columns signifies generations or waves of Jesus followers found throughout the documents making up the New Testament library. Here, generations means waves or chains of witnesses rather than a set number of years, like 20 years each generation or 40 years each generation. Therefore, generation as used by these presentations is not like comparing the baby boomer generation with Gen Xers and millennials. Understood in this sense, Paul and his social circle belong to the second wave or generation of Jesus followers or messianists. This perspective and sense of generations can also be used to properly understand Paul's authentic letters, in distinction from all other New Testament literature attributed to Paul, but forgeries, even if inspired. First-generation Pauline documents trace back to the historical Paul and his interaction with persons in the small Jesus groups that either he or other apostles established, anachronistically rendered as churches. Second-generation Pauline documents, Colossians and 2 Thessalonians, are forgeries written after Paul had died. Third-generation Pauline documents are also forgeries, these written multiple decades after the historical Paul had died. These would be Ephesians, a sort of letter written to non-Israelite Jesus group members, and the pastoral letters, 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus. There is also the document called Hebrews, a sort of letter, really a homily, written to practicing Judean Jesus groups. Such chronological information regarding generations or waves, in this sense, is important in helping modern New Testament readers avoid the pitfall of anachronism. It also helps a 21st century New Testament reader to trace development in Paul's thinking. But there is another pitfall with equally potential devastating consequences: ethnocentrism. 21st century Western readers interested in Paul's theology, like these people, are at a particular risk of falling into this pit of ethnocentrism.